nature, things of that 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 nature.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Pod of That Nature. Curtis Wilkerson and Andrew Ellis here with you from inside Arkansas. Kind of a bummer after Arkansas picks up the big upset win over Tennessee that you got to wait 2 weeks to see him play again. But the bye week offers us time to reflect a little bit and then look fondly into the future. Andrew, I think we've definitely been looking fondly into the future over at Inside Arkansas Live. People have been going nuts as we do the hypotheticals. Could Arkansas be a college football playoff team? Could they do this? Could they make the SEC championship? It's fun to talk about, not because it's actually realistic, but because it's not entirely off the table because of the work Arkansas has done. But we're here today to look back a little bit. We're running it back. We usually do our pregame show about this time, and then we go through and we do our postgame report cards and everything like that. Semester break is here, right? It's the holiday. Report cards have come out. It's midterm review time. So we're going to go through this thing position by position and grade it out, see where the Razorbacks are kind of relative to what we expected, see where the stock is trending for some different position groups and some different players on the team, and get you all primed up for the second half of the season. Andrew, how you feeling, man?
I'm feeling good, and I do want to clarify, just before we get into this and before people start yelling at us because they disagree with our takes or whatever the case may be. We're grading this on a little bit of a curve of kind of what we were expecting coming into the season, which is going to factor into how we grade these position groups. And luckily, we did record a podcast called Stat Projections where we kind of just talked about some of what we expect out of some of these guys. And with stats, it's a little bit harder, but I think it does give us a little bit of an idea of how we felt preseason. So we're kind of trying to hold ourselves accountable as well in terms of what we expected. And, we have that written down. And so if you want to make fun of us for the stat projections, don't worry. We're going to do it now because we're going to make fun of ourselves for doing it.
Yeah, it's 100% right. That's true, man. We do these bold predictions and everything before games, and we come back and hold ourselves accountable. We do it for the preseason stuff too, which is usually a little bit more egregious. And in some cases, I know one in particular in the receiver room I'm gonna have to take an L on here shortly. But anyway, let's get into it, man. Let's talk about quarterback. We always start there. And I don't know how you feel about it, Andrew, but this is going pretty close to how I expected with Taylen Green. And I mean, if you look at his stats, it's interesting because he ranks up there in the SEC in terms of just total production when it comes to passing yards and rushing yards at the quarterback position. He's definitely stacking yards, but hasn't necessarily finished maybe as much as we thought that he would. What's he at? 5 touchdown passes, 5 interceptions on the year. So a kind of a clean split there, which to some people that might be worthy of really dinging him in the grade department. For me, it's not, because that's just kind of what we've come to expect, I think, from Taylen Green. He was 11 touchdown passes, 9 interceptions last year. So I'm curious to see where you land on this with Taylen Green. I think there's been a lot of the good that I expected in terms of him being so dynamic, effective as a runner, just kind of that wild card who's always a threat to make a big play. And then there's been the bad where he is not the most accurate passer. We knew that coming into it. He's 56.6% completions on the year. The intermediate balls, the deep balls, he can struggle on at times. The reads aren't always there. We know all of these things. Holds on to it too long, whatever, sometimes. It depends on, I guess, if you're a glass half full or glass half empty type of person. For me, I think I'm probably going to go, honestly, with Taylen, probably about a B- relative to what I expected from him. I don't think he's played his best football. I was hoping maybe we would see a little bit more progression with the switch over in his mechanics to Bobby Petrino, and maybe we'll get that a little bit later. I was a little bit torn between B- and C+. Had he not had the 70% completion game against Tennessee, I probably would have went a little bit lower. But I think that's about where I'm at personally with Taylen Green. And then the other thing I like to do here is just kind of a stock analysis, because somebody could have, overall maybe not lived up to expectations, but they're coming off a great game or something like that. And so for me, I think Taylen, his stock might be trending up based on what we saw in this last game against Tennessee. Obviously, you hope he's healthy.
Yeah, it's weird where You mentioned that Tennessee game, and I had the 70% completion. I feel a little bit differently. Like this would have been a lot harsher of a grading situation had that game not happened if we were doing this a week ago. But yeah, Curtis, it's weird where if you look at his numbers, if you had showed me the 5 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, I would have been a little disappointed, but I wouldn't have been super surprised because, we look at his numbers. I think he was 11 touchdowns, 9 interceptions last year. And the year before, he was a little bit better, but it's not terribly off from what he's done for his career. I would have expected him to be a little bit better, and I did, which is what we projected. But I also would not have said he was going to be throwing for 250 yards per game and being, top 3, 4 in the SEC in passing yards. And so it's a little bit weird where, it's looked about overall, the overall picture has looked about like what we expected it to look like. Which, by the way, anyone who's watched us, throughout this whole season and even leading up to the season is probably tired of us giving this spiel, but we have been saying this for a while that Taylon's going to have those games where he's 10 for 21 and you're like really erratic and you can't complete a pass, but then he's going to have the Tennessee games, which is kind of what he did in the spring game where he was just making throws down the field, putting balls in perfect positions and confident and calm and collected with what he's doing. And so I expect throughout the year we're going to continue to see a little bit of both, a little bit of everything with Taylon Green, but I will be interested to see if that Tennessee game was a little bit of a step forward for him and if he's able to build on that. Now he is banged up and we'll have to see what the monitor his health throughout the next week. But yeah, overall, Curtis, tying it back to the grades, I am like you. We are very like-minded on a lot of things. We usually are aligned. And I'm just a meaner person than you, which is why I'm going to go C+. Because again, like I think it's been about what we expected. The reason why I'm not going to go into that B territory is because you can't have 5 touchdown passes in 6 games in 2024, in the year of our Lord 2024, when offensive football is at an all-time high. You can't have 5 touchdown passes through 6 games. Now he does have 4 rushing touchdowns, which is not worth overlooking. And he's been a factor on the ground. He's on pace for about 650 rushing yards, which is about what we expected from that department as well. But he's been a really big factor for Arkansas's offense. So overall, I'm pretty pleased with Taylon Green. I think if we're doing the stock analysis, I think it's slightly up. Like I think he's had some nice little moments here lately that we're going to see if he can build on. So overall, I'm pleased with Taylon Green. This is about what we expected, like you said. Plenty of room for improvement. I think C+ is right around fair, and I wouldn't argue it'd B or B- too much either, and I'm not going to.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, man. And just looking back at our preseason predictions, we had him for about 2,600 in the passing yards department, and he's at just over 1,500 now. So it seems like he's on pace to be a little bit above that. But then we had him in that 18, or I had him in that 18 to 19 touchdown range. And boy, he's going to have to start shoving it to get there. If he winds up getting to 18, 19 touchdowns, Arkansas is going to win 8, 9 games this season, because that would be a hell of a back half of the season there. But yeah, the thing about Taylon too, the guys who are the roller coasters are the hardest to grade. I felt that way when I used to do the player grades for basketball. I felt that way with Devo, because he was impossible to figure out, because he'd do the thing where he wouldn't take a shot for an entire game, but then he'd have like 9 assists at the same time. And then he'd be really inefficient. He'd score 19 points, but then he would have, 6 turnovers in a game. And you're like, how the hell am I supposed to put this on a scale? And Taylon Green has kind of been that wild card for Arkansas too. But running backs, this is interesting. And I definitely want to let you
coaster here.
Yeah, exactly. I want to let you go first, because it's tricky, because coming in the year, we kind of thought, all right, Jaquindon Jackson, Rashad Dubinion, 1-2 punch there. Braylon Russell, somebody who could come on, maybe as a freshman as the season progresses. And just because of injuries, suspensions, and everything, Jaquindon Jackson has been the constant, and we're starting to see a little bit of shift in the running back room. It's interesting, because I think I said, man, I have a feeling that Braylon Russell might be a guy who kind of emerges as the number 2 back at the end of the season and supplants Rashad Dubinion. Rashad Dubinion hasn't even had his chance, and now he's gotten a couple carries. So I don't know what the future looks like for him. It's an interesting group.
Curtis, I want you to take this hand right here, and I want you to pat yourself on the back. We're patting, and I'm doing it the same, because we crushed this preseason. we heard all the preseason fall camp talk of, oh yeah, we got 5 running backs. We're going to rotate them all. It's going to be great. And we heard what they said during spring, and we said we're calling BS. Jaquindon Jackson is the number 1 back, and it's Jaquindon Jackson and everyone else. And if you go back to our stat projections, we're not. This isn't revisionist history. This is identified. You can go find this in the archives. But we basically said we're not buying the idea that this is going to be a real rotation of running backs, albeit we didn't know that Rashad Dubinion was going to get randomly suspended / demoted to 4th team / maybe banged up / who knows. But either way, I still don't think it would have mattered too much. I think clearly, and Hog fans can see this, Jaquindon Jackson is on a different level. Like, he is Arkansas's bell cow. He's their guy. And Curtis, we both expected that he was going to have 1,000 yards rushing. We both kind of had him as a 1,000-yard rusher, which he's on pace for about 1,100 yards, and we'll see if he's able to keep that pace or add to it or what it looks like. And we'll also monitor his health as well, because he left that game the other day with an injury, but it does seem like he's going to be fine. And I think you nailed it with the Braylon Russell thing, where they're starting to build him up into this offense a little bit more. He's now got 124 rushing yards on the year through 6 games. So technically on pace for about 250, but it seems like he's going to end up with closer to that 350, 400 range. Curtis, I feel like it's played out in terms of the distribution of carries and all that. Aside from the Dubinion just being a non-factor for a few weeks there, it's been about what I think we both expected. And for Jaquindon Jackson, man, we put a lot on this guy. Like, we had high expectations. Yeah. And I feel like he's been everything we've expected of him. You could even argue a little bit more. Like, I don't have any critiques of him other than, hey, he had a couple fumbles there early. That was getting a little weird, but he's cleaned that up pretty well too. Curtis, I'm going to go with a solid A- for Jaquindon Jackson, or just the running back room as a whole, because I will say Braylon Russell hasn't had a ton of opportunities. I mean, do you have any critiques for him? I don't. I think he's been running the ball really well. I think given the situations they've put him in and what they've asked of him, I don't know if you could have asked much more out of a true freshman who's making his first few appearances in college football. And so I've been very pleased with the running back room for Arkansas. I feel like it's the strength of the offense. It's one of the strengths of the team. And especially, it's worth noting, we'll talk about the offensive line a little bit more in depth here in a minute. It's not like this is an offensive line that's just out here throwing dudes around. It's not like they're walking through wide open holes. And so I think you got to attribute a lot of Arkansas's offensive success. And I know it's been a little bit lesser in SEC play because you're facing tough defenses who crowd line of scrimmage and are going to force you to beat them other ways. But overall, Curtis, I've been very pleased with Arkansas's running back room, and Jaquindon Jackson in particular is a monster, and he's been everything we've build him to be. And so the fact that we put so much on him and he's lived up to it is why I'm giving him an A-, which I guess you could do the other side where you're like, we expect him to be good and he's good, so I'm not going to grade him as highly, but I'm giving him the props because we put a lot on him and expected him to be the bell cow, and he's the bell cow.
Yeah, no doubt about it. If there was a group on this offense that is probably maybe slightly below where we expect him to be, just not in terms of yardage, but just, the struggles in the red zone, finishing, putting points on the board. If we were to give a position group an A, it would have to be the running backs. And I think I'm with you. About an A- is where I'm at. For all the reasons you mentioned with Jaquindon Jackson, 10 rushing touchdowns. Arkansas had 9 all of last season. So that's pretty good, I think, based on the math. And then, I mean, it's Arkansas has rushed for 20 touchdowns and they've thrown for 5. Now, Tannen Green has 4 of those on the ground, but the rushing attack is really where Arkansas makes its money. So, I feel really good about him, man. If we were to talk about, a stock riser in this group, it would definitely be Braylon Russell, which is exactly, I think, what we maybe anticipated coming into the year. And I'm really interested to see, like, the group as a whole. Even though the last couple games, and it's been against stiffer competition that, maybe trending down a little bit, just, Jackson hasn't popped off the way he was earlier in the season, which you don't necessarily expect. But with Rashad Dubinion back in there, he just, what he looked like last week? He looked like fresh legs. He had a little bit more pep in his step, some burst in there. I like the idea of Arkansas having a little bit of a change of pace there. That's why I liked Rodney Hill early on, because Jackson's fast. But, between him and Russell, they're both just so big and physical and powerful, and having somebody who's a little shiftier and can move like Dubinion and can catch the ball out of the backfield like Dubinion, that excites me. So the prospects moving forward, I'm more optimistic maybe than I should be, or maybe than I anticipated to be for the running back room the rest of the season. I feel good about him, man, for sure. Wide receiver. If we want to talk about, yeah, here's the deal. Andrew Armstrong he's incredible. I mean, he really is. We're talking about a guy here who through 6 games, he's averaging 110 receiving yards per game. He does not have a touchdown reception, which is criminal. His parents don't care. He doesn't care. We care. Get that man in the end zone. It's unreal. But my goodness, and he's only played in 5 games is the other thing too. And he's got 552 receiving yards, 38 receptions. He is a legit number 1 go-to receiver in the SEC, as we thought he was. So that's really good to see. I think it's fair to say that Isaiah Satania has made the leap, because it was myth. It was potential. It's what you hope to see for the longest with Satania. And through the first handful of games, we were kind of seeing that, oh yeah, he had some really nice moments in this game. Oh, where the hell was he this week? But it's becoming more and more consistent. I like it. 21 receptions, great. 312 yards. He's on pace for a really nice season. Love that about him. That's it, man. All the hype about Tyrone Broden. And yes, I predicted him to be, what did I say? He was going to be Arkansas's second leading receiver in yards or
yardage. Yes, you did say
yardage. Yeah, in yardage. That ain't going to happen. He's got 9 receptions on the year, 138 yards. We've seen the weird connection there with him and Taylon Green. Tesla had the one big game. Other than that, we haven't seen him all season. And that's really been it. All these other guys that we've heard about, Andrew Jordan Anthony, 5 for 57. Shoffrey Brown's been hurt. Monte Harrison turns out was not a thing. Davion Dozier, where are you, brother? There's not any depth there. And I think that I've at least graduated from what I've said the last couple of weeks of them having 1.5 receivers. So now I'll say they got 2. Isaiah Satania, I give you a full tally now, brother.
It's a firm. It stops at 2. There ain't no 2.5. There ain't no 2.1. It is 2.0.
Right, exactly. And for me, and just based on my expectations coming into the year, I knew Armstrong was going to be the guy, the security blanket. I really thought that they were going to have a really, really solid starting group between him, Satania, and Broden. They've got 2 of the 3, and that's pretty much been it. I'm going to go, even as pleased as I am with those 2, I've got to go C on this one.
Yeah, and so it's interesting with the Armstrong aspect of this because, again, we had very high expectations for him coming into the year, and we all kind of viewed him as the guy. And, when we did our preseason stat projections, he had 764 yards receiving last year and 5 touchdowns, which it does not seem like he's going to be able to replicate because Arkansas has 5 touchdowns total through the air. But we both kind of expected, hey, he's going to have, an uptick in production, maybe 800, 900 yards, but neither of us were sold that he was going to be like this first team, like 1,400 yard, massive receiving season. And part of that was we thought it was going to be a little bit more well-rounded passing attack where they were going to be splitting it up a little bit more. And so it's very disappointing a little bit that Arkansas is not doing that. And that's not really a thing that's happening. And that Satania, who, by the way, I feel like Satania, he's been about what we've expected as well, for the most part. I feel like I don't want to overlook him because, and I know you didn't either. And he's on pace for about 600 yards, only a couple touchdowns, which is a little bit tough. But his one touchdown was a very important one. But yeah, so I mean, it's weird because it's hard to be too disappointed with the group because of those 2 guys kind of living up to their billing and being what they're supposed to be. But I agree with your assessment of it, where I just can't give the entire room a great grade, knowing that you just had 2 guys show up to the party. And I mean, we thought Broden was going to be in that mix for 400, 500, maybe 600 yards, which he's going to end up at this rate with 150 yards, kind of what he was last year. And Tesla, it's weird that Tesla is technically on pace for 400 yards, which sounds like, okay, yeah, it's a solid number 3 receiver. But like you mentioned, it pretty much all came in that one game where he had 125. And so, yeah, I think I might go C+ simply because Armstrong has shown a willingness to kind of make up for the deficiencies of other people where because this was what's funny is in our stat projection preseason, I was like, I don't think Armstrong's going to get 1,000 yards. I was kind of adamant about it where I was like, I don't think he's going to have a massive uptick in production. And although the touchdowns haven't happened yet, which I guess is another thing you can knock everyone for, he seems like he's willing to eat whatever deficiency there is. Like he's like, all right, if you're not going to catch 3 passes, I'm just going to catch 3 more. If you're not going to have 40 yards, I'm just going to add 40 yards to my total. And so I feel like he's done a good job of kind of making up for it and just kind of being the safety blanket, being the guy Arkansas can go to. And I mean, you mentioned he's only played 5 games. So I mean, we're talking about a guy who's really like, if you extrapolate it, is on pace for closer to like 1,300 yards receiving, which is just nothing to scoff at all. I mean, that's a big deal. That'd be one of the best in school history. And so we'll see where he ends up. And again, I'm pleased with Satania, but I don't know what to do with this group. I'm going C+ overall, just because I know I'm a little bit all over the place here, but I just cannot overemphasize how disappointed I am that this isn't a real receiving core, that it's 2 guys. It's 2 guys, and really it's like one really awesome guy, a pretty good guy that we like, and we're pleased with his progress. But man, it just falls off a cliff after that. And I'll be honest, like I didn't see that coming preseason, and that shows in our coverage. We kind of thought it was going to be a more legitimate 3-4 man weave here.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I'm going to bump them to a C+ also. And part of it is I was probably a little bit jaded, honestly, just the Bobby Petrino angle of it, of like, oh, like these guys struggled to get separation last year. He's going to have them running free, and oh, he's not going to deal with any bullshit on the route running, and in some cases that's been the case, but I do feel like I at least need to acknowledge that you have an inaccurate passer throwing the football to him. And so for that, I'll give him a little bit more grace. Like now Broden's dropped some balls, right? But there are some there where if the throw was even reasonable, his numbers probably look a little bit different. Jordan Anthony would have a touchdown right now if Green could have, you know what I mean? So
would CJ Brown.
So would CJ Brown. Tesla's numbers would look even better if he got the 70-yard touchdown pass he should have had last week. So I understand all of that, and I'm not asking Taylor Green to be perfect, but it does factor into it because it's somebody throws it, somebody catches it. So the throw needs to be good if you're going to catch it, whatever. So I'll bump them up to a C+. If they were 3-3 instead of 4-2 right now, hell no. But we give them a little bit of grace.
Yeah, fair enough. But also, I just think it's fair. Like, I know we've said like the Armstrong and Satania and everyone else, but it's like you might have a 1,000-yard receiver on this team. Which, like, when you have a 1,000-yard receiver, like that has to matter a little bit. I mean, I think there's only been like 5 in school history or something like that. So it's Andrew Armstrong. We'll see. It's going to be unfortunate if it ends up being 1,000 yards and 0 touchdowns. That just simply cannot happen. Get that dude in the end zone so we don't have to talk about this anymore, please.
I'm sure somebody has done the research, but I wonder if that's ever happened at Arkansas.
He's the only guy in college football with as many receptions and yards as he has with 0 touchdowns. Like, there's nobody in college football this year that is doing it.
That is absurd, man. And the crazy thing is, if he gets it, it won't be because they, draw something up for him in the red zone. It'll be he catches the ball moving towards the sideline and does the thing where he turns it back midfield and gets a bunch of yak and scores. Like, it'll be a play that he 100% makes on his own. Tight end. Listen, man. I understand that Arkansas is in a good spot. The vibes are high with this team right now. They're 4-2. They're rolling. Dudes have been banged up back there, whatever. I'm going F. I'm sorry. Because I thought that this was going to be a huge strength for Arkansas, where I wondered about, okay, do they have enough depth at receiver behind their first group? Doesn't matter, because you know what? You got Luke Hasback, who's going to be one of the best tight ends in the country. You got Ty Washington, who emerged as a really, really solid pass-catching threat at tight end. All we heard the entire spring and fall was about how Varkey's Gums has figured it out. It's clicked, and he's ready to roll. Oh, you got the blocker coming in Posca, so you don't have to worry about that. This was supposed to be a really, really solid group. Luke has 8 receptions for 109 yards on the season. Ty Washington has 2 receptions for 225 yards. Varkey's Gums has 1 reception for 0 yards.
Did you say 2 for 225?
Did I say 225? 2 for 25.
He made the most of his 2 catches.
Yeah. Well, the point is they've sucked.
Yeah. Not been great.
Not been great. Haven't been targeted. Haven't been utilized. Congratulations on blocking, but that's not good enough for me.
I'm going F as well, Curtis. And again, part of it is the preseason prediction of kind of what, not even prediction, but just what we expected of this group. We expected tight end to be one of the strengths of the team. And I don't know if we bought that like they were going to be 4 or 5 deep or whatever, but we thought Luke Haz was one of the best players in the country. I mean, College Football 25, he's their highest rated player. And we thought Ty Washington, there's people that still think Ty Washington is better than Luke Haz, which means they think Ty Washington was one of the best players on the team coming into it. So it's like, you expected that to be like a legitimate duo. Varkey's Gum's another guy who's had a lot of production throughout his career, and he had a nice offseason. He showed plenty of flashes in the spring. And so it's like, I don't know what happened or when they made that decision, because I will say it's clearly like almost a concerted effort by this offense to not include the tight ends.
Correct.
But it's weird because in the spring, it wasn't like they were throwing to tight ends in the spring pretty well. Like all these guys that we're talking about, I mean, I know Luke Haz was kind of in and out with injury, but like Varkey's Gums had a lot of awesome plays. Ty Washington looked, when he got back from injury, looked great. I don't know what happened. And so look, part of this grading, it's not even, I don't want to be unfair to the actual individuals, because I understand like they're just not being asked to contribute in the passing game, which like that's by Petrino's decision. Like he knows more football than us. Cool. But in terms of just what we expected this to be a real factor for this team. And to say that it's not would be like an understatement. And so you mentioned the blocking there, Curtis, and our friends over at PFF, they have Luke Haz as they have him with a 72.4 run blocking grade, which is that's a solid mark. That is a solid mark. That's not what Luke Haz is here to do. Like it's just not. And I mean, you mentioned he had 8 receptions. Like that's just borderline inexcusable. And look,
it's crazy. That's more than I thought.
I mean, honestly, yeah. When you said he had 100-something yards, I was like, "Wow, triple digits, cool. All right, nice." But yeah, I expected this group to be a lot better. If you go by PFF, also the 2 lowest graded players on the entire offense, and it's by a pretty wide margin, are Ty Washington and Varkey's Gums. So you can do the whole, oh, well, they block. Well, those 2 guys are liabilities in the blocking game. Let's just be real about that. And they're not catching passes. And Luke's not catching passes, and he's a pretty good blocker. Yeah, pretty good run blocker. Like that's and Arkansas's run game has been awesome. So like that's fine, but it's like if that's what the calling card is, that's what the selling point is for why the tight ends aren't bad. Everyone who's gonna, because I'm sure there's some people listening that are like, you know what, it's unfair. If we had told you preseason that Luke Haz was gonna finish the year with 200 yards receiving, y'all would have thought that something crazy happened, that there was a fire. Yeah. And there has not been a fire. He's been banged up, but it's been really disappointing. And it's really, again, it's not even as much about the individuals as it is that it's just not a factor for this team. Like this offense doesn't feature the tight end, and I don't know if we'll ever get real answers for that, but it's very disappointing. So I'm giving an F. It's a little bit of a spite F, but it's an F.
Yeah, I'm on the same wavelength with you, man, and I don't know. Like this is not something we were talking about the stock analysis. Like I can't look at that and be like, oh, or maybe it's a buy low situation.
Like, oh, now they're starting to do it. No, like there's no signs of life.
Brother, we've literally reached the point where they switched Josh Street's jersey number so he could get in there and help out. Like this is bad, man. So hopefully the bye week helps out with some health. But my goodness.
Hey, can I give a quick? We don't have to talk about this, but fullback. I'm grading the fullback position for Arkansas A+.
Hell yeah. Yes. Maddox Lassiter, he is our GOAT. So if you guys aren't unfamiliar, just look at what the man does. He's incredible.
Maddox Lassiter has a higher PFF grade than Luke Haz. Who imagine telling someone that preseason, and it's not a small sample size either. Maddox Lassiter has a higher PFF grade than Luke Haz. Let that sink in.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Shout out to Lassiter. He's a jack of all trades, and he has been for a long time now, and wouldn't surprise me at all if he's taking over the kicking duties here pretty soon. What can't he do? In all seriousness, though, like he's been pretty good, and he freaking flattened somebody. I can't remember who it was, but somebody last week got popped by that man. It was awesome. Offensive line, this is another one of those. Here's what I will say off the top: the stock analysis for me is that it's trending in the right direction.
It's like a little bitty curvature up.
Yeah, just a little upward bend there for the offensive line. They were much better against Tennessee. It wasn't perfect by any means. Still got a lot to work on, but that'll play. Like you can work with the effort that you got from them against Tennessee. you can't work with the effort that you got from them against Texas A&M and in some other games this season. It's been wild. The struggles in pass pro, well documented. The struggles on the right side, well documented. Pretty good run blocking. Maybe not so much the last couple weeks, but they've also played some really, really fantastic defensive lines. Kudus has been banged out. He was going to be obviously a key cog in the operation. That opens the door for a Marion Harris to emerge. Maybe both of those guys can play moving forward. We'll see. But yeah, it's been a mixed bag for me. I did not subscribe to the thought that just because Cody Kennedy was out the door and you went and tried to rebuild this thing through the transfer portal, that they were going to go from arguably the worst offensive line in the country to just a vintage Sam Pittman, bully ball offensive line. But we definitely agree that they were going to be better. I think they are. Gosh, man. C plus.
Literally, C was exactly what I had in my brain.
Okay.
And Curtis, so it's I know there's some people that are probably like, how do you grade the offensive line a C, but you grade the tight ends a F? Again, what we expected preseason matters a lot. And look, going back, because I went back when we do stuff like this where we're kind of like holding ourselves accountable. I go back and listen to some of the stuff that we said preseason, and we had plenty of questions about whether or not, like, that's not you saying revisionist history of you saying you didn't buy that they were going to be a vastly improved group that was going to be top half of the SEC. You were saying all that preseason, and we also even said we trusted them a little bit more in the run game than we do in pass protection because it's not a very athletic group. Not a ton of future pros. These are a lot of future insurance salesmen on this offensive line, which, there's no shame in that. People go pro in something other than sports, but I think that what you expect out of the group has to matter. And we didn't have super high expectations. We just wanted this group to be improved from last year and capable enough to let this offense work. And I feel like that's what this offensive line is. And it's weird. Is like if you dig into the numbers of like PFF and stuff a little bit further, you could actually make a case that they're better than maybe they seem on paper, or maybe that people view them. Like the Texas A&M game, for example, was a game where all the pass block, they got like massive high grades throughout the thing. They were crediting Talon with leaving the pocket too early and inviting pressure himself, which he definitely does, which is a factor in this whole thing. And I definitely think in the run game, Jaquin Jackson makes them look better than they are. But I also think Talon in the passing game makes them look worse than they are, if that makes sense. And overall, I don't really think they're like that great or that bad. I think they're just about they're just out there. You know what I mean? Which, by the way, in offensive line, like I say that as a knock, it's really not. Like you just kind of you don't want your you don't want to be talking about your offensive line a ton. And what we didn't do after the Tennessee game was talk about the offensive line, and that was their toughest test of the year by far. And so you mentioned that it's a curvature going up. I'm generally like somewhat encouraged by that. And I guess we also have to mention, we talked about there's not a ton of future pros. If this offensive line had a future pro, it would be Patrick Kudus, who has not played. And I feel like that's a factor in this discussion. So given the way that they handled the Marion Harris situation, thrusting him into action for his first starts, had to shuffle some things around, and you have a first-year quarterback, and it's a whole new group. I mean, offensive line is one of those positions you got to be in sync. This group had never played together before, and so I feel like they've handled the adversity that's been thrown their way pretty well. They haven't passed these tests with flying colors or anything. I think it's just been about all right. It's been about what we expected. I could even be talking to maybe even a C plus, but I think I'm going to go C. Just 74 overall C. There we go. You passed the test, but you're not going to put it on the refrigerator. Your mom's not going to frame it. But you passed the test.
Yeah, and when we do our final report card at the end of the season, there's an opportunity that this could be better. But I thought if this team was going to get back to the postseason, take a step forward, that the offensive line it just had to go from bad to average. That's all you really needed, and I think they're kind of headed in that direction. And obviously the record kind of validates that. Moving over to the defensive line. Andrew, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we entered the season feeling pretty good about the first four being Landon Jackson and and Campbell and Eric Gregory, and then probably the combination of Junkaj and Nico Davier. Now Junkaj has been all cardio so far this season, but we were, I think, very open about, boy, there ain't much depth there, and how is that going to impact them? And so from that standpoint, I think we pretty much nailed it. Arkansas has been difficult to run on, and there's been a couple backs who've got loose on them a little bit in the last couple games here, but it's almost like skewed a little bit by one big play here. Like Dylan Sampson wound up having a big game, but he had the 53-yard run. Outside of that, it was 2 here, 3 there, whatever. I think they've held up pretty well there. The pass rush has not been great. It's getting better. I don't know. Where are you at with this group?
So, okay, in terms of the stock analysis, clearly the stock is up. Like, yes. I think they're making progress throughout the year. I think Landon Jackson in particular, he's been kind of a big story. People were very disappointed early. Now you're starting to see him show up a little bit. And now you look up and you're like, hell, he's on pace for another all-SEC season. And his PFF grade is like in the low to mid 80s. Like, he's really creeping up there, putting together some solid performances. Curtis, it's weird because, again, I just said they're coming off of a very encouraging performance. Cam Ball played his best game of the year.
Been waiting on
Landon
that.
Jackson's been playing some good football. Quincy Rhodes has been really productive. I really liked what Quincy Rhodes has done. Curtis, he's only played 61 snaps. He's got an 81.0 PFF grade. He's only played 61 snaps. I'd like to see him get in there a little bit more. But Curtis, I got to be honest. And again, by the way, I should clarify. Preseason, we expected this group to be bad. Like, I don't know if bad is even the right term, but like the expectations were not sky high. So I'm not going to grade them super harshly because of that. Right. But I can't go higher than a C-, Curtis. And here's why. If you just go player by player on this defensive line, Ian Jaffard has 57 snaps. He's been okay. Just really hasn't played a ton. Danny Saili's only played 20 snaps. Landon Jackson, I would say he's been pretty good. Like, that would be the way I would describe his season so far, is pretty good. Junkaj, not great. Nico Davier has been fine. Like, he's had some moments here and there. He was really good in the UAP game.
After that first game, yeah, exactly. People were like, oh, here he comes, but it's been, you're right. He's been fine.
Yeah, and I really thought him and Cam Ball would take that next step that they haven't quite taken yet. Charlie Collins has played 10 snaps. It didn't go well for him. It just is kind of one of those things. There's not a ton of depth in this group, which is something that you kind of have to knock them for. And I feel like the starting group has been fine, but they've been asked to play so much that I feel like it's impacted their performance. Arkansas doesn't pressure the quarterback a ton, although, again, stock up because their best performances of the year have been here in the last couple weeks. And against the best teams that they've faced, it's kind of bizarre how that's worked out that way. And so it's like, it's kind of weird where, like, if you had told me just preseason, you'd have showed me what they did against A&M and showed me what they did against Tennessee, and I would have been like, wow, Arkansas's got a vastly improved D-line, but they were so bad in the Oklahoma State game. They struggled against UAB. They couldn't get pressure against UAB. I don't know. I'm going C- simply because I feel like they're kind of still the weak spot of the defense, and the depth pretty much cost Arkansas the A&M game. And I feel like it's still a little bit of an issue with this team, though I am encouraged by what I saw last week.
Yeah. I couldn't have said it better. I think I'm in the same exact vein there. C-, was hoping to see more. Yes, depth is a concern. Yes, agree with you completely. It's trending in the right direction in terms of their production, but I do still worry about that depth as we go down the final stretch of the season. Like, it'll be nice to get some rest, little R&R for these dudes who are taking 70 snaps a game or whatever. I'm with you. I hope that a guy like Quincy Rhodes starts to see more snaps. He's flashed at some times in the last couple games here. It would be nice to just see a pulse out there in the pass rush from Junkaj, because I know that's something they were really they were banking on it. They were relying on it. We haven't seen that yet. And then, but the defensive tackle situation, I'm concerned about because if somebody were to go down, and that's the case in a lot of scenarios, but boy, they really would just not have much there. Kevy Rose is a nice, depth piece, but buddy, that's it. So,
before we move on, Curtis, I did just want to say this. Anton Junkaj was credited with 3 pressures against Arkansas Pine Bluff. He was credited with 1 pressure against Oklahoma State, and he has not recorded a pressure since then. And he's played like 50-something snaps in those last 4 games.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about like legitimately nothing out of him. So he's been, he's just a kid. They're just kids, Curtis, but been a disappointment. Nico Davier, similar kind of thing where he had like 3 pressures in that first game, and has had a couple. He's had more than Junkaj, but just hasn't really flashed much. And Cam Ball, thanks for showing up to the party against Tennessee, but
needed that, man.
A lot of those guys that you kind of wanted to be more solid and kind of solidify the group haven't really done that. And Curtis, I feel like the D-line has cost Arkansas 2 games. Am I crazy for thinking that? Like the A&M game is a little bit tough because, you just threw the second group in there. But the reason they had to do it is because they had played 60 snaps to that point. And the Oklahoma State game, I feel like the second half, D-line just completely failed to show up, and it ended up kind of
Alan Bowman's back there hanging out for 8 seconds before he has to throw the football. That's a tough position to put the back end of your defense in for sure. I'm with you on that one, man. And yeah, in terms of like a stock riser in that group, I'm really glad that you brought up Quincy Rhodes. I feel good about what we've seen out of him recently, and hopefully he continues to trend in that direction. Linebackers, buddy, I was really, really worried about this group, and rightfully so. Aside from Brad Spence, every contributor they had in that room is playing football somewhere else. And they didn't have a lot of proven commodities there. Xavier Sor, you brought in from Georgia. I think we all felt good about him being a competent SEC linebacker, but we didn't know how much he was going to take off because we just haven't seen enough of him from his time at Georgia. Spence, you were hoping would take the next step. I think I actually expected more from Spence than what we've received. But when you go out and you're really trying to bank on guys who you pick up post spring football to come join your team in the summer or for fall camp, and they're supposed to be big time contributors for your football team, and big pieces for your potential success, that's a red flag, man. But shout out to Steven Dix for coming in and assuming a starting spot and just being really, really damn solid. And I know they got some other guys who they move around out there, and maybe based on camp, Switzer, we thought there would be more there. It was cool to see Larry Worth play football last weekend, and hey, he looked good while he was doing it. But based on what I expected and what we've gotten out of the linebackers, buddy, I'm going A for those guys because I thought it was going to be trouble, and they've been really, really good. They fly to the football. They're disciplined. They're physical. I've been really, really impressed with them.
I've been extremely impressed with them, and I was actually kind of prepared to go B+. I think I'm going to bump it up to an A-, just because, again, we're talking about what we expected preseason. Right. I mean, dude, if you go back 4 or 5 months ago, we were really worried. We thought this was going to be like the undoing of the team. We were like, and we talked, I think it was D-line and linebackers were lumped together.
Yeah.
But, dude, you could have made an argument linebacker was the shakiest position on the entire roster in spring football because, again, we kind of assumed, you bring in a blue chip guy that transfers from Georgia, you assume he'll be pretty good. But in spring ball, it took him a while to kind of get the ropes. Like he wasn't flashing in spring ball. And Brad Spence is a freaking true sophomore who hadn't played a ton. And so it's like, damn, are you really sure about that? And then, like you mentioned, you bring in Switzer and Dix, who didn't practice at all in the spring. So it's like, are you really expecting those guys to be impact players? The answer is yes, especially with Dix. And here's what's interesting about the linebacker room, Curtis, is like, I feel like the sum is greater than the whole of its parts. Like if you look at Xavier Sori and, if you were to put a monetary value on him, he's obviously a good player. Steven Dix is a good player. But like you said, Brad Spence, you can make an argument, has been almost like underwhelming. And I do think Brad Spence has had some good moments and he's been pretty solid, but it's not like he's been a world beater. It's not like Switzer has been very good at all. And so it's like you kind of look at those. If you just went player by player, you'd be like, are they that great? But every week, this group just finds ways to make plays. All 4 of those guys have made massive plays throughout the year. And just week to week, they find a way to get it done. And they're exactly what Travis Williams needs them to be. And credit to Travis Williams, obviously, he's the linebacker coach and the defensive coordinator. He's going to have that group ready to play. He's going to put them in a position to succeed. But man, given the expectations and given kind of the concerns we had, to say that they've alleviated them, I mean, man, it's been impressive. And yeah, I I'm very pleased with the group. And I will also give them credit because we've been saying Arkansas's pass rush has been getting better here over the last few weeks. A lot of that has come from the linebackers. In fact, if you look at Arkansas's like pass rush grades on PFF, Xavier Sorey has the highest pass rush grade on the team. Now, it's not a massive sample size. Larry Work is also in that mix there, has a very high pass rush grade. Brad Spence has a higher pass rush grade than he does a tackling grade. He's been a better pass rusher than he's been a blocker or a tackler. And so it's like, it's kind of been weird, but I think that this linebacker, like they just use them in unique and creative ways. And it's kind of interesting because you have guys like Switzer who are pretty much defensive backs and a guy like Brad Spence who's pretty much an edge rusher. But it's like, it's just a weird little mix of skill sets. And I think Travis Williams is getting the absolute most out of that group. If you just look at what they are on paper, which I feel like that's what coaching is. I mean, you're a coach, is just you have these skill sets. How do you use them? I could not imagine Travis Williams utilizing this linebacker room better. I'm kind of been blown away, man. I love watching this group play. They're fun to watch.
Yeah, they really are. Just looking at the defensive stats right now, you're 100% right. The sum is greater than the whole. It's insane. You just put them all together and it's the right mix. And there's not the that's right. there's not the standout, the one game wrecker kind of guy out there. It's just, you put those 11 guys out on the field and they just work in sync so well. And you're right. That's such a huge credit to Travis Williams. If you just look at their defensive box score for the season, you'd probably look at it and go, I don't know if this group is really that good, but they are though. It just, in general, it's crazy.
Can I give us a little bit of props real quick? Just to let you know that we know ball, and really we got lucky on this. So on our preseason stat projections, we talked a lot about how like Arkansas's had a 100 tackle guy pretty much like every year of the last like 6 years. Last year, I think Jaheim Thomas finished with like 96 or something like that. You were pretty adamant. You were like, I don't think there's a 100 tackle guy on this team, and I agreed with you. There will not be 100. I mean, unless Xavier Sorey really just goes nuts and has like a 25 tackle game. Yeah. And you said you could see Sorey being right around 80 tackles. Would you want to know exactly what he's on pace for?
I'm looking at it
right now. And it's crazy is I made a joke on the preseason show where I was like, it's kind of weird how I think there's too much depth, which came out of nowhere because we didn't think the linebacker room had any depth. I was like, I think they're going to rotate 3 or 4 guys, which will kind of make it to where nobody can get 100 tackles. And it's kind of worked out that way. And so it's been very, very weird how it's played out. But yeah, there you go.
Yeah, very cool, man. The secondary, this has been fun because had you told me at the beginning of the season that you just like Jalen Braxton and Hudson Clark would have just not really played, I would have been, I think, very, very concerned about what this would have wound up looking like for Arkansas. But man, just so much credit to give around. You nailed it with Marquise Cuddy Robinson, just being a dude who can really hold his own at a corner spot in the SEC. And he's done that. He stepped up really nicely. It's been interesting to me at corner because I don't think Jaheim Singletary or Keon Stewart have been particularly good, but they also haven't been completely exploited outside of, a game here, a play there. So they've held up okay in Braxton's absence. Hopefully you're going to get him back. But man, TJ Metcalf's, ascendance on the back end has been incredible. Danico Slaughter has overcome what was a really rough start to play some pretty darn good football here recently. Jaden Johnson he's just Mr. Dependable back there, just reliable. Extension of the coaching staff, Jaden Johnson. This group, man, it's again, I don't look at them and see, and I know Metcalf had the huge game against A&M or whoever the hell it was, or Auburn, whoever it was. But I don't see like that's their dude back there. But they're all just damn solid, and their assignment sound, and they're playing really good football. I've been really impressed with the secondary.
I have been too, and I think it's similar to linebackers where it's kind of like you said, like it's better than it looks if you just go piece by piece, and you're like, is this guy good? Is this guy good? Is this guy good? And you might not come away being like, this is a damn good SEC secondary, but you watch them play together, and you're like, it's a damn good SEC secondary. Like it just is what it is. Yeah. If I were going grade, I think I'm going B+ here. and I'm not going to get talked to an A- here. I'm going B+. And part of why I'm so bullish on this group is because, like you mentioned, you don't have Jalen Braxton, who might literally be the best player in the entire secondary. Like, you can make that argument seriously. And Hudson Clark is the most experienced player in the secondary, and he's only played a handful of snaps. Curtis, I want to read you some numbers here. Marquise Robinson has been targeted 19 times. He has allowed 10 receptions for 124 yards, 0 touchdowns. He also doesn't have an interception, but just has not really allowed any huge plays. Like, that's massive. You mentioned Singletary, who I would say has been pretty shaky, and Slaughter, who has had some moments of being really shaky, but it hasn't really cost Arkansas a ton. And I think both of those guys have been much, much better in recent weeks. And I think it's really a testament to the coaching staff as well, of just hiding some of these weaknesses a little bit and not putting those guys in position to get burnt. I mean, because how often, you have the defensive back that everyone hates, and then you're looking at it, you're like, yeah, well, he's being asked to guard Trey Harris from Ole Miss. Of course he's going to, and so it's like, I think it's a testament to this coaching staff that if Danico Slaughter has been put in a position to get jammed on, it hasn't maybe other teams aren't seeing that, but I feel like they've done a good job of kind of hiding their weaknesses a little bit. As a basketball coach, Curtis, when you've got a 5'9" point guard, you've got to just kind of hide them a little bit. You've got to run some kind of weird zone. You've got to have a help defender really, really help nearby. And I feel like this defense just does a really good job of putting these guys in position to make plays. And all of these guys that we've listed have made their fair share of plays. And TJ Metcalf has made the most of his. I mean, the SEC Defensive Player of the Week, the National Player of the Week. He was awesome in that Auburn game, and he's been a really nice breakout player. Him and Jaden Johnson, I feel like, have been like the subtle MVPs of the defense. Because you mentioned Jaden Johnson, how consistent and solid he is. It's true, man. And it's I want to give the kid a lot of credit, because you remember that Missouri game a couple years ago, I believe it was 2022, where it looked like he quit on the field. Like, it looked like they yanked him out of the game, and it really looked like, oh man, he's out of here. And Miles Slusher had quit the team the day before. And I believe he and Slusher were very close. And Pittman even talked about this afterwards, where he's like, I think he got in with the wrong crowd. Like, he was hanging out with the wrong guys and a couple bad apples. I think Jaden Johnson had a crossroads in his career at that point, that offseason. And then all offseason, we heard that he had responded to that challenge. He was pretty solid last year. He's been even better this year. You said extension of the coaching staff, which is kind of funny because that's what they said about him, which we thought was funny because we never would have thought we would hear that about Jaden Johnson. Man. But I want to give that kid a lot of credit, man, because he's really turned it around. And yeah, he's one of the captains of Arkansas's defense. Like, I know that they rotate the captains, and they have 37 now, but I think Jaden Johnson is one of the most important players on this team. And I think TJ Metcalf's emergence has been a really huge factor for this defense. I am very pleased with the secondary, and I'm very optimistic about what they can do when you get Jalen Braxton back, because then all of a sudden, Singletary, you don't have to lean on him as much. You just have Marquise Robinson, Jalen Braxton, who you feel really good about. Your safeties you feel really good about. Slaughter's been a lot better here lately. And you've got Hudson Clark to mix in there and kind of cover up some of those woes if any of those guys are slipping. The stock is going straight up for this Arkansas secondary. I am very pleased with this group overall, and B+.
Yeah, no, I like that. Let's see. That's kind of what I was feeling. I need to be a little bit different. Am I going to be harsh? Am I going to be?
We've been a little too agreeing with each other here.
Yeah, I know. I think for the sake of being different, you know what? I actually am going to go a little bit higher just because of them doing what they've done without Braxton, who he was the one guy where I was like, listen, he's the man back there for sure. And you haven't had him, and you've still been as impressive as they have been for the most part. So yeah, sure. I'll go A-. Also, rumor has it Miguel Mitchell might be available
from the clouds.
Like, I don't know if that means anything at all, but
hello, Miguel Mitchell.
We'll see what happens there, man. Let's see. So, okay, let's talk big picture stuff here, and we'll include special teams in that, and we'll start there. Special teams has been, I don't know, frustrating, I think, for me in a number of ways. The kicker situation has been a mess. I think they made the wrong decision on who their starter was, but I don't know all the details that went into that. And Ramsey has struggled significantly. Now he's hurt, so Shipley's going to get his opportunity. We'll see if that changes things. But not only has that, kept 3 points off the board for Arkansas about half the time they attempt it, just the lack of trust that they've had in their field goal kicking has changed what they've done offensively. Like that has contributed to some turnovers on downs and going for it in spots that they probably normally wouldn't, which is something that we talked about, frankly, in the preseason of, like, is this offense going to be better? Are they going to score more points? What's the red zone stuff going to look like? Hey, it's not a deal where you get across midfield and you're like, oh, well, we get to fourth down, we're going to let Cam Little give it a shot. We knew that wasn't going to be the case. It's been worse than I expected from that standpoint. I'm a little bit disappointed that we really haven't gotten much Isaiah Satania return game. Haven't seen much there. Punter Devin Bell's been pretty solid, so I'm happy with him for the most part. I don't know, man. Like they've avoided getting a freaking punt block that's cost them a game that we've seen a couple times over the years. It's been a little bit up and down with some of the trickeration they've been trying to do.
Up and down is a good way to describe it. It's had one really notable up and one really clear down.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to go still though C-. I think I can't get over the struggles at kick. Like you can't be 50% kicking your field goals. And when you got a weapon like Satania and just haven't been able to get him loose there. And they had the deal a few times there where your protection's literally running into him and causing him to muff a damn. So that's irritating too. So yeah, maybe I'm a little lower on special teams than I thought I was.
So, okay. I was really prepared to go C+ and like kind of push back and be like, they haven't been that bad. Then I remembered that I forget who it was. It Cross Johnson.
I think
it was Cross Johnson because everyone said it was Metcalf and it wasn't Metcalf.
Yeah.
They got blocked into him. And that's just like stuff you can't have. Because what my case was going to be, Curtis, was, there hasn't been much in the return game. Isaiah Satania, I believe it's like 5 for 47 in the punt return game and just a couple kick returns. But I feel like their coverage units have been good. Their kick coverages, been mostly touchbacks. Haven't allowed anything there. Haven't allowed anybody to return punts against them, which is very valuable. Because that's just one thing that changes a game more than any. But you've got a couple plays, the stupid fake that they shouldn't have ran that didn't cost them the A&M game, but was a huge swing play in that game. And you had the muffed punt, which pretty much did cost you that Oklahoma State game. So that's a little bit of a tough one. But I do want to give Devin Bale his props. Curtis, if you just had to guess, where does he rank in terms of average yards per punt in the entire country? Just off the top of your head.
In the country, you said?
Yeah.
He had that 66 yarder, so he's probably up there in the upper 40s by now in terms of average per punt. He might be pushing top 25, dude.
Well, Curtis, not only is he pushing top 25, he's pushing top 5. He is number 6 in the country.
Kidding. Wow.
48.1 yards per punt. And of course, that 66 yarder certainly helps him. I didn't look at and see because PFF does grade the punters, which is always nice. And they graded Max Fletcher really well. But yeah, Arkansas's punting has sneaky been like last year. Max Fletcher was actually really pretty solid. I feel like he got unfairly criticized a lot because he would have a random shank here and there. But Devin Bale has been like, pretty much one of the better punters in the SEC. He's leading the SEC now in yards per punt, which I know yards per punt is not like the only thing that matters. And when you don't punt a ton, like Devin Bale, a 66 yarder skews it a little bit. But he also had like maybe the best punt we've ever seen against A&M to pin them at the 1 yard line. He's getting opponents inside the 20 a decent amount. Had a couple where I'm like, hey, you could have maybe given that one a little bit more of a boot. But I've been very pleased with Devin Bale. But the kicking thing is the biggest variable of this Arkansas special teams. It's been the biggest swing thing, and I agree with you. I think they made the wrong decision. We'll see. Shipley now has the reins with Kyle Ramsey out for a while. We'll see if he's able to bring some stability. And I feel like here's what's tough is if he does bring stability and he turns out to be just like a 75, 80% kicker, it's almost going to reflect poorly on the coaching staff where you're like, what the hell were y'all doing?
Yeah.
And so like, it's kind of a lose-lose or a win-win, depending on how you want to look at it.
Yeah, for sure. And what kills me about it, just looking a little bit deeper into Ramsey's misses, all of his misses, every single one of them has been between 40 and 49 yards.
Wow.
And it's not like he's been put in a position where he's had to drill a bunch of deep ones or things that others doing. 40 to 49, you got to be able to hit that as an SEC kicker. And it has Arkansas in a position now to where they really aren't strongly considering kicking a field goal unless they're inside the damn red zone. And that just shouldn't be the case. Like there has to be that middle ground where it's like, all right, we know we can get 3 here. And those are like, they're not chip shots, but my goodness, like you got to be able to cash in those 4 of 9 from 40 to 49 yards.
Yeah, just like every now and then when it's a clutch situation, hit one of those, you know?
Yeah.
And weirdly enough, he's hit a couple 50-yarders, hadn't he?
He's 1 of 1 from 50 and beyond, but he hit a 40-something yarder.
Like a 46 or 45.
Maybe against A&M. I think that one that put him up or whatever. But yeah, just it's got to be better, man. Got to be better.
Yeah.
Big picture offense, just overall, what would you give the offense for a midterm grade?
C+.
Yeah.
They've been fine. Like they've been fine. Yep. I think depending on who you ask, there were some people that thought Arkansas was going to be like really good offensively. And there were times in the offseason where I thought, hey, they've got a chance here. If this Taylor Green guy is going to be improved or whatever, I feel good about the run game. I overrated the receiver room a little bit, the depth of it. And I think I even overrated the offensive line a little bit. Like I didn't think they were going to be great, but I thought they'd be a little bit better. But yeah, the passing game, it's weird that it's like they're getting so much yardage. I just didn't think they would only have 5 passing touchdowns. The run game's been great. Like C+. They've been C+.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at too. I mean, if you look at Arkansas in terms of total yardage and everything like that, and people say what they want about stats, but there are a lot of things to be encouraged by. What drops them down for me, obviously, is it's not resulting in points. And so they're not cashing in on their opportunities. And I look at the red zone conversions, and Arkansas's red zone scoring percentage is dead last in the SEC. And that is something that has to change. And I think it'll improve in the next half of the season. And it's going to have to, if they're going to do some of the things that people are expecting them to do now that they beat Tennessee. So, but yeah, you got to finish drives, got to convert, and chill out on the turnovers, which they did in the game against Tennessee. So
I did not realize Arkansas was 4th in the SEC in yards per game offensively.
Yeah.
But scoring wise, they're a little bit lower. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're 7th in scoring at 33 points a game. And in SEC play, weirdly enough, they've been a lot worse.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, what are they averaging in SEC play? Like 20?
We can do the math off the top of our head right here. They scored 17 against A&M. They scored 24 against Auburn, and then 19 against
20 a game.
Was it 20?
Yeah, I think it's 20 a game.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, like they're fair.
Yeah. Okay. Overall defense. I mean, I don't know how we couldn't go A minus.
I was gonna say A minus is what I had in my brain, simply just because like the Oklahoma State game, you lose a game where you give up, like 40 points in or whatever, which again was more just a depth issue there, and the fact that the offense just decided to stop moving the ball entirely. That was a little bit tough.
They were unprepared for UAB and looked poor in that game. They have been great since.
I mean, Arkansas's defense just straight up stole them the Auburn game. I mean, they gave them no choice but to win that Auburn game. Their defense was that good. And then they did it against Tennessee. You could make the same thing. And they did it in a different way. They didn't force a ton of turnovers. They didn't get a bunch of huge plays. They just completely nullified a Tennessee offense. Those 2 performances right there, right alone, are like massive. A little bit shaky against UAB. And it's funny, when we were talking about the secondary, I was thinking, after that UAB game, our confidence in the secondary was so low. And so it's kind of crazy to see the transformation they've made. But overall, man, I feel like this defense, it's hard to ask them to be much better than what they've been. And I didn't think they were going to be like bad or anything preseason, but there were times in the offense or in the offseason where I was like, are we sure Arkansas is going to be good? And I think at one point, I literally said on one of our streams preseason, I was like, if Travis Williams makes this like a top half of the league defense, then like he's nobody should ever question that guy again. Just given what Arkansas lost and some of the replacements that we thought really weren't that great of replacements. Again, the expectation matters, and I expected this defense to be on a similar level to the offense, and they're substantially better than the offense to the point where they've carried them to 2 SEC wins, which is just extremely impressive.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's Good place to be in for Arkansas right now. 4-2 overall, 2-1 in the SEC, and it's.
I mean, if you got an A offense and a C defense, or an A defense, C offense, you're a B. So it's like it works out.
There you go. A lot of football left to be played. Some really big games. A lot of big home games, which you're more excited about now that Arkansas actually got up and played in a home game. So that's cool. But yeah, lots to look forward to. This has been fun. Do a little bit of review, take stock of where Arkansas is at. And now we can get excited and look forward to the rest of the season. Anything else you got, Andrew, before we get out of here?
Tune in to Arkansas Live, Inside Arkansas Live every day.
Yeah.
Leave us that like, leave us that subscribe, leave us that hit the notifications bell so you know when we go live, when we do all of our shows, or when we put out content. And that kind of stuff really does go a long way. Also, if you're listening on podcasts, this is a random thing. I remember Trey used to do this a lot, but leave us a review. For some reason, that apparently helps if you leave us a review, unless you're going to say something bad about us, in which case, do not leave us a review. Yeah. But if you got good things to say, leave us a review. Give us that 5-star rating. Get that podcast up and running.
Yeah, you could. I mean, you could even say something bad, but just give us 5 stars. Give us a 5-star and say something bad. We'll allow that. We'll accept it.
And you can DM us your actual critiques.
Yeah,
for the review. Yeah.
But no, we do. We really appreciate everybody for tapping in with us. And one of the coolest parts about this entire thing is was just doing the math on it the other day. And like, we record a lot of stuff. Our faces are out there, our voices are out there a ton, but we are live, brother, like 10+ hours a week. And the reason we do that is so we can take the phone calls and so we can engage with the chat, and everybody listening and pitching in has been really, really cool. So we appreciate you guys for sure. And we're looking forward to the coverage the rest of the season. So do all the things that Andrew said. But for Andrew Ellis, been Curtis Wilkerson with Inside Arkansas on the Pod of That Nature, and we will catch you guys very soon. Everybody have a good one.